Alrighty, so we talked last week about seventh chords and progressions using seventh chords, chord progressions, and we talked about this chord progression 2-5-1. The 2 in a major key is always minor with a lowered 7. The 5 in a major key is always dominant, and the 1 in a major key is always major 7. Because of the notes that each one of these chords share with each other, after you play chord 2, there will be the 5. So chord 2, let's say chord 2 has root 3, 5, 7, right? 5, 7 of chord 2 always ends up moving. 5, 7 always moves to look for the root 3 of the next chord. The bottom 2 notes, though, they remain the same. So the square here remains the same. This guy here means it moved. They remain the same because the root of the 2 chord happens to be the 5 of the next chord, and the 3rd happens to be the 7. So again, let me see if I can say this in a more succinct way. In this progression, 2 notes, once you play the first chord, the chord 2 minor 7, 2 notes will always remain the same, and 2 notes will be new. The new notes will always be the root and the 3rd of the next chord. So right here, for instance, here's a 2-5-1 in the key of C. D minor 7 goes to G7. See, the bottom 2 notes of D minor 7 remain the same. So in D minor 7, D is the root. In G, D is the 5th. So those notes are in common, even though they have a different function. In D minor 7, F, the 3rd, remains the same because F in G7 is the 7th of that chord. And then from the 5-7 to the 1 major 7, the top 2 notes then remain the same. So let's go ahead and play that. So in C major 7, the 2 chord is D minor 7. For the quiz, you're going to play the chords with the right hand, and you're going to play the roots with the left hand. Then we go to G7. We need to find a root for G and a 3rd for G. And then for C major 7, we need to find the root for C major and the 3rd for C major. So let's do that again. We have D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Does that make sense? It doesn't? What part of it doesn't make sense?
I'm having a hard time figuring out why there's 2 notes next to each other.
Why there are 2 notes right here, you mean?
Yeah.
So the chord is G. Here's G, right? Here's the root, here's the 3rd of the chord, here's the 5th. Now we need the 7th. So the 7th of G, here's G. This would be the major 7 of G, because if you play a G major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, this would be the major 7. If you lowered it, is the flat 7. So we need to add the F to be the 7th of that chord. Does that make sense? If we played a 2-5-1, now everybody pay attention here, even if you get this. If you played a 2-5-1 without the 7th, here would be D minor 7, right? That's without the 7th note of the chord. Then we would go to G7. This would be the inversion because that's the closest inversion, right? Now if we add the 7 to this, 7 of D is C. Then we go to G. 7 of G is F. So it's right there. Does that make sense? So the notes that are crunchy with each other here, they're always the 7. The 7 is always the one that crunches with the root. Because if you think about it, root is here, root is D. Here's the other root going down. Here would be major 7, lowered 7. So you see, like from the root to a root to the blah, blah, blah. From the root to a 7, if they're inverted, they're really always next to each other. Does that make sense? Anybody has any other questions about that?
For every inverted?
So if you have a 7th chord, every inversion will have a crunch. Because check it out. Here's C major 7 in root position. When I invert it in first inversion, there's the crunch on the top. If I invert in second inversion, the crunch is in the middle. If I invert in third inversion, because now we have 4 notes, we can have third inversion, the crunch is on the bottom. So with a 7th chord that is inverted, there's always a crunch. And by crunch, I mean like a note right next to each other. Yeah, any other questions? So check it out. I think you all probably understand this logically, but the mathematics involved take a lot of frontal cortex, you know. And we, like artists and stuff, we know that we have a frontal cortex, but we're more intuitive and stuff, you know. And when you start adding like a 7th, it's music that's a little harder to figure out by ear as well, because it's just more complex. So if you're a person that relies a lot on your ear, or if you're a person that like relies more on the kinesthetic, the way that the chord feels, the more complex the chord, it's harder to do intuitively. You kind of have to do more math, you know. So when you practice this at home, like if you wanna, like one of the things that help is like you can really spend time like writing the notes out, doing the math, because I feel like in my experience teaching, folks that learn more by ear, there's even a part of most of you right now that don't quite believe what I'm saying. You're like, either I don't get this or she's just saying some stuff there. Just, you know what I mean? Because it's hard to like connect with the mathematics of it and finding the 7th that quickly. So spend the time doing some math and writing down all the chords. Wow, I love the polka dots. All right, I don't remember what I was saying. Let's go ahead and play it in another key. So let's play more keys because it will help make sense of it. So the second key here that is notated is the key of F. In the key of F, we have one flat, right? B flat. So because we're dealing with B flat with a key of F, there will if a B shows up, it will be flat, right? That's one way I think about it. Another way I think about it is like, okay, we know that the 2 chord is always minor. So 2 in the key of F is G. So let's find G. Now let's make it minor. Now let's add the root. The 7th. My bad. Here's the root. Here's the root 1 octave above. If I go half step down, I get a major 7. Another half step down, I have a lowered 7. So here's 2 in the key of F, G minor 7 in root position. The 5 chord of F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is going to be a C, right? So I need to have a C. A C chord has an E. A C chord has a G, which is already here on the bottom. And a C7, the 7 is lowered, so you see it's like a whole step below the root. So this is C7 in second inversion. And then I need the 1 chord, F major. I'm going to need an F. I'm I'm gonna need an A. C is already there. E is already there. Make sense? Let's do it again. G minor root position. C7, second inversion. Here's C and E. The bottom two stay the same. Now F major 7 root position. Any questions about that one? Okay. Next key, B flat. The 2 chord, what is the 2 chord in B flat?
C.
C. All the 2 chords are what quality? Are they major or minor? Minor. C minor. What kind of 7th is in a 2 chord? Are they major 7 or lowered? What was that? The 2 chord, is it going to have a lowered 7 or a major 7? Lowered. So here's C. Major 7 is half step down. Lower 7 is B flat. C minor 7. Then we go to F7. We're going to need an F. We're going to need a third of F is A. And the bottom two stay the same. And then B flat major 7. Does that make sense? B flat is here. Major 7 is half step down from B flat. One more time, C minor 7, F7, B flat major 7. Any questions about that key? All right, let's do the key of E flat. In E flat, what is the 2 chord? F. 2 chords are major or minor? Minor. Major 7 or lowered 7? Lowered 7. What is the 5 chord in E flat?
G.
E flat is right here. Let's count 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 5 chord is the B flat. 5 chords, are they major or minor? Major dominant. Dominant means it's a major triad with a lowered 7. In the 1 chord, E flat is always major 7. We know that the F, we're going to start in root position. The 5 chord will be in second inversion, so the F note will be the lowest note for that inversion. And so that's second inversion. And we know that E flat is in root position. So here's F minor 7. First we can find F major. Make it minor. Add the lowered 7. Here's F major 7, lowered 7. F minor with a lowered 7. Then we go to B flat 7. I'm going to need a B flat. And we're going to need a D. The F is already part of the chord. A flat is already part of the chord, so we leave them there. And then we're going to need an E flat major for the 1. I'm going to need to find an E flat. And find a G. The top 2 notes stay the same because that's the 5th and the major 7. One more time, F minor 7, B flat 7, E flat major 7. Any questions about that key? Yes.
My question is, if it's an E flat chord, why do we not play E flat?
E flat?
Yeah.
Here's E flat.
So is that where we start with E flat chord, or we start with F chord?
we always start with the 2 chord. So the progression is 2, followed by 5, followed by 1. So remember when we did a progression that was like 1, 5, 6, 4? That one started with the 1 just because the progression was called 1, 5, 6, 4. A progression doesn't have to start on the 1 or end on the 1. So like last year we also did a 6, 4, 1, 5. So 6, 4, 1, 4, 5, right? So that one started on a 6. So progression can start on any of the chords, but this one starts on the 2. So, but it ends on the 1. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So progression does not need to start on 1. You see, this one starts on 2.
So like this part says key E flat, like we just don't.
We take the E flat. We say, okay, the key is E flat. We start with the 2nd chord in the key of E flat. And we end with the 1st chord of the E flat, which is 1.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's do another one. Let's do G. What is the 2 chord, Kalia?
In G.
Yeah.
A.
A. And 2 chords are major or minor?
Minor.
Minor with a lowered 7. Now count from G and tell me what the 5 chord is. G is 1.
D.
D, exactly. So the 5 chord is D with a lowered 7. And what is the 1 chord in the key of G?
G.
G major 7, exactly. And we're going to start with a minor in root position. Here's A minor. A major is here. A minor. And we want a lowered 7. Major 7 is half step down from A. Lowered 7 is a whole step down from A. So here's A minor 7 in root position. Then we go to D, the 5 chord, and D will need a D. So I'm going to bring this guy down to play a D. D we need an F sharp. And the rest of the chord, A is already there, and the lowered 7 is right in the middle. Here's your D7. If you want to notate D7/A, you can, if that helps you remember. So like A minor 7 is root, D7/A, and then G major 7, and here's the major 7 up here. Let's play it again. A minor in root, D7 in 2nd inversion, bottom 2 stay the same, D in the middle, F sharp on the top, and then G major 7. Any questions about that? Really ask. No? Alrighty, let's do one more. You guys are going to become experts. 251 experts. Super useful in your life. Alright, so D is the key. If the key is D, what is the 2nd chord in that key? E. E minor 7. Let's count from D. If D is 1, what is 5? A. And 5 is always dominant, meaning major triad with a lowered 7. And if D is the key, what is well, 1 is D. And all the ones are major 7. Major 7 can be notated with a triangle 7 or an MAJ 7. All right, E minor 7. Here's E minor. We add the 7. Here's the root. Down by half step is major 7. Down by half step is lowered 7. E minor 7. A7. We need an A. We need a C sharp. We need an E. We need a G. And then we go to D major 7. We have a D, F sharp, A, and C sharp. How's that? Let's play it again. E minor 7, A7, you gotta find an A, you gotta find a C sharp, the E is already there, the G is already there, and then D major 7, we need a D, F sharp, A is already there, C sharp is already the major 7. Any questions? You're gonna totally nail the quiz, aren't you?